I was sitting on my narrow cot, the sounds of distant gunfire echoing softly through the tent walls. The desert heat had cooled a little that evening, and I remember holding a cup of instant coffee in one hand while scrolling through my emails on the other. Most messages were routine. Updates from command, a few newsletters, spam, and then I saw it. An email from my husband. The subject line simply read, "Regarding us." My heart skipped a beat, thinking maybe he missed me or had something sweet to say. I opened it without thinking twice. But it wasn't sweet. It wasn't anything I expected. It was a formal divorce notice. No greeting. No explanation. Just cold words probably copied from some legal template. He didn't even address me by name. Just, "This is to inform you." And it kept going, line after line, emotionless and final. I sat there frozen. For a second I thought maybe it was a mistake. I read it again. And again. The words didn't change. My hands started shaking and my coffee spilled all over my lap, but I didn't even notice. I just kept staring at the screen. Then I scrolled down, and that's when it got worse. He had included screenshots, proof that he had emptied our joint account. Every dollar, every cent we had saved over the years, gone. My name was still on the account, but the balance was zero. I refreshed the app on my phone to double-check. Nothing. Not even $1 left. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. I wasn't just being left, I was being erased. And he didn't even have the decency to speak to me like a human. Just an email. Just like that. It wasn't always like this. If someone had told me years ago that he would leave me like that, I would have laughed in disbelief. We met in the most ordinary way, at a small coffee shop not far from my college. I was there studying for an exam, buried under notes and highlighters, and he came up to ask if the seat next to me was taken. One casual conversation turned into another, and within weeks we were inseparable. He was charming, attentive, and always knew the right things to say. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have found someone who truly saw me. When I told him I was considering joining the military, he looked proud. He told me he admired my strength, my commitment, my courage. He said he would support me no matter what. At the time I believed every word. He held me tightly the night before I left for training, whispering promises about how we'd build our future together, how we'd stay connected no matter how far apart we were. We opened a joint account a few months after getting married. It just felt natural. We shared everything. We had plans. Big ones. A house in a quiet neighborhood. A family. Maybe even a dog. Every paycheck I got went into that account. I didn't question anything because I trusted him with all my heart. I didn't just love him, I believed in him. Before deployment, I made sure all the bills were set up and I handed him complete access to everything back home. The house, the car, the account, the passwords. He told me not to worry about anything, that he'd take care of it all while I was away. He even kissed my forehead and said, "Just come back safe. That's all I want." So I left with peace in my heart and faith in my marriage. I truly thought he was going to be there waiting for me, proud of me. I had no idea that while I was preparing to serve, he was preparing to betray everything we had built together. After that email, everything changed. I tried to stay calm, telling myself maybe there was some explanation. Maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe he would call or text or even send a follow-up message. But nothing came. I picked up my satellite phone and dialed his number, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent texts, emails, even tried messaging him through social media. But each time it either bounced back or showed that I was blocked. He had shut every door. The days that followed were a blur. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that email, those empty bank account screenshots. I tried to focus on my duties, but my hands would tremble when holding my rifle. I was supposed to be strong, reliable, focused. But inside I was falling apart. One morning I walked into the small base store to grab some basic supplies. Soap, toothpaste, snacks. I swiped my card and it was declined. I tried again, thinking maybe it was the machine. Declined again. I checked my backup card. Also declined. Panic hit me like a wave. I stepped outside, sat on the ground, and opened my banking app. Both accounts, empty. Nothing left. Not even enough for a meal. I felt humiliated. I had to borrow money from a fellow soldier just to buy a toothbrush. I didn't want to explain why. I just mumbled something about technical issues. But inside I was crumbling. I wasn't just dealing with a divorce. I was stranded, helpless, without answers or support. And worst of all, It felt like I didn't matter at all to the one person who once swore to love me through everything. He didn't even give me the dignity of a goodbye. He didn't say sorry. He didn't even tell me why. He just vanished with every dollar I had ever earned, leaving me to survive on borrowed supplies in a war zone, thousands of miles away from home. It wasn't just betrayal. It was like he had ripped me out of our shared life and erased every trace of me, like I was never part of it to begin with. I must have looked like a ghost walking around base for those first few weeks. I did my duties, kept to myself, answered when spoken to, but I wasn't really there. I was just moving through the motions, trying to survive each day without falling apart. Then one day, while I was sitting alone near the back of the mess hall, quietly staring into my untouched tray of food, a senior officer walked over and sat beside me. She didn't ask any questions at first. She just handed me a cup of tea and said, "You don't have to go through this alone." Something about her calm presence broke the wall I'd been trying to hold up. I didn't tell her every detail, but I gave her enough. She listened, nodded, and didn't offer fake sympathy. She told me she'd been through her own kind of betrayal, and then she handed me a blank notebook and said, "Start here. Just write. Even if it's messy, angry, or painful. Let it out." So I did. At night, when the world was quiet and the others were asleep, I'd sit on my bunk and write. At first it was raw and angry, pages full of hurt and questions. But slowly my words started to shift. I began writing about what I'd learned, about my strength, about how I'd been blind, but not broken. I also started working out harder. At first it was just to burn the pain out of me. But soon it became something more. I felt myself getting stronger physically and mentally. With every weight I lifted and every mile I ran, I was rebuilding the version of me he tried to destroy. One night, after writing for almost an hour straight, I closed my journal, looked up at the stars above our tents, and whispered to myself, "He may have left me, but I won't let this break me." It wasn't just a thought, it was a promise. A vow to myself that I would rise from this. I started planning not just my return home but my return to life, on my terms. Stronger, wiser, and far more dangerous to anyone who ever thought they could break me without consequence. The day I returned home from deployment, I expected at least a familiar face at the airport. Not balloons or banners, just someone. But there was no one. I stood by the baggage claim, surrounded by strangers hugging their loved ones, tears and laughter everywhere. But for me, silence. No welcome. No ride. No home waiting. Just me, my duffel bag, and the echo of my own footsteps as I walked outside and ordered a cab. When I gave the driver our home address, he looked confused and said, "You sure? That house sold a few months back." I didn't believe him until we pulled into the street and I saw the real estate sign gone, a new car in the driveway and unfamiliar curtains in the windows. My heart dropped. That was our house. The one we picked together. The one I paid the mortgage on while I was overseas. Gone. Just like that. I sat in the cab in shock for a minute, then pulled out my phone and started digging. I found a new address tied to his name. An apartment complex about 30 minutes away. I told the driver to take me there, even though I had no idea what I'd say when I arrived. I just needed answers. When I knocked on the door, I heard movement inside. Then the door cracked open and there he was. My husband. Or rather, the man I used to think was my husband. He looked surprised, frozen for a moment. Then just as quickly his expression shifted to something smug. A woman in a silk robe appeared behind him, curling her arm around his waist. He didn't say sorry. He didn't ask how I was. He just smirked and said, "Wow, you really came back." I asked him how he could do all this. Leave me, take everything, sell the house, move in with someone else. His response. Cold and simple. "You were just a phase. I found better." Is like a punch to the soul. Not because I still loved him. No, that had died the moment he stole from me. But because of the pure disrespect. The way he spoke, like I was nothing more than a temporary inconvenience in his life. But in that moment I knew something he didn't. This wasn't the end. Not even close. I didn't stay long outside that apartment. After what he said, standing there 1 second longer would have been giving him more of my energy than he deserved. I turned around, walked away with my head high, even if inside I was still burning. I didn't cry. Not then. My tears had dried up months ago in that desert heat. Now I was focused. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to get my life back, and make sure he'd regret everything he did. A few days later, I bumped into someone I hadn't seen in years. Kayla, a friend from basic training. She worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs now, and when she saw me, her eyes lit up with surprise. We hugged, caught up, and eventually ended up sitting at a small diner sipping coffee. I told her the surface-level version of what happened, just the divorce and the stolen money. But when I mentioned my husband's name, her expression changed. "Wait, that guy," she said slowly. "You know, your name came up in a benefits review a while ago. Some weird activity. I didn't know it was you at the time, but the file had your military ID all over it." I leaned in, heart racing. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then pulled out her tablet and opened a secure portal. She showed me reports, documents filed under my name claiming housing allowance, spousal support, deployment bonuses, things I never applied for. And worse, she showed me forged signatures. Mine but slightly off. Claimed addresses I'd never lived at. Payments that went to a bank account I didn't recognize. He had used my military deployment as a golden ticket. He wasn't just a selfish cheater, he was a criminal. Then came the worst part. My name was also tied to unpaid taxes and suspicious loan applications. He had created a financial mess in my name, hidden behind my deployment, knowing I wouldn't be able to monitor everything from overseas. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was identity fraud, theft, and abuse of military benefits. I felt sick. But I didn't let it show. Instead, I thanked Kayla, asked for every file she could legally share, and went straight to a military legal officer the next morning. I told them everything, laid out the documents, the forged applications, the statements I had gathered. The officer listened carefully, took notes, and finally said something that made my chest tighten with both fear and hope. "This is serious. But you did the right thing bringing it to us. We're going to take this very seriously." And just like that, the power began to shift. He thought he could use me, discard me, and disappear into a new life. But he forgot one thing. I wasn't just some heartbroken woman. I was a soldier. And I wasn't done fighting. The legal process wasn't fast. Nothing ever is when it involves the government. But once it started, it moved with quiet power. After my meeting with the military legal officer, I was assigned a dedicated investigator. We spent weeks gathering every shred of proof. Emails, signatures, statements, bank transactions. Every forged application he filed in my name became part of the case. Every lie he told, every stolen dollar. All of it was documented. I gave a full statement and signed off on pressing charges for fraud, identity theft, and spousal theft. I expected to feel nervous. Instead, I felt focused. It was like being back on a mission. Only this time the target was personal. But the twist I didn't see coming? His new partner, the woman he had replaced me with, she wasn't just a clueless bystander. The investigation revealed that she had helped him forge documents and open fake accounts. She even posed as me once during a phone call to confirm a housing bonus. So while he was being charged, she got dragged right down with him. I contacted my bank and froze every account that still had my name attached. Then, with court orders and legal backing, I froze any assets that had been purchased using my stolen identity. That included the furniture in their apartment, their shared car, even the joint account he'd moved our money into secretly. It was all flagged. One morning, I got an email confirming that the benefits he'd been receiving through my deployment status were officially revoked. That same day, I heard from Kayla. His military spouse ID was deactivated. He couldn't access the base, couldn't use the healthcare services, and couldn't touch a single cent linked to my service. And then one by one the consequences started falling like dominoes. His bank accounts were locked due to suspicious activity. The apartment was repossessed because it was leased using falsified income. And finally, the company he worked for? They found out about the fraud charges. A background investigation led to his immediate suspension, then termination. I didn't even need to scream or cause a scene. The system, slow and careful, did it all for me. But I did want one final moment. A quiet, honest confrontation. So I arranged to meet him at a neutral location through his lawyer. When I walked into the small conference room, he looked like a completely different man. Tired. Angry. Worn out. Not the arrogant person who had once told me I was just a phase. He looked at me like he still couldn't believe it. Maybe because in his mind I was supposed to be broken, begging, humiliated. Instead, I sat across from him, calm and centered. No emotion on my face. Just peace. Because I knew the storm had already done its work. He opened his mouth, maybe to argue or blame me, but I raised my hand slightly and said, "Don't." He froze. I leaned in a little, not angry, not loud. Just steady. You erased me like I never existed, I said. Now I'm returning the favor. His eyes widened, and for the first time I saw something I had never seen in him before. Fear. Real helpless fear. I stood up, turned around, and walked out. I didn't need to look back. I didn't need an apology or a fight. I had already won. And I hadn't needed to lift a weapon. Just the truth, the law, and the strength he thought I didn't have. After that final meeting, something inside me shifted completely. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about freedom. True freedom, from the lies, the betrayal, the pain. I had faced one of the deepest kinds of heartbreak, and I had survived it. More than that, I had turned it into power. I packed my few belongings, gave away what reminded me of the past, and moved to a different city. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere new. A place where no one knew my story unless I chose to share it. I rented a small apartment near the water, started fresh, and built a peaceful routine that belonged only to me. I threw myself back into my military career with more focus than ever before. I took new training, enrolled in leadership programs, and started mentoring younger women entering the service. Every day I reminded myself of the strength it took to get through those dark months. The nights crying alone in my bunk, the rejection, the betrayal, the feeling of being nothing. And now here I was, standing tall. About 6 months after he was arrested, I got a letter. It came through a legal channel from the correctional facility. I didn't even need to open it to know who it was from. I could feel his desperation through the envelope, the sudden awareness of what he had lost, the regret, the excuses, maybe even the apologies. I opened it anyway, mostly out of curiosity. It was a long letter, handwritten, messy, emotional. He wrote about how prison had given him time to think. He said he missed what we had. That he was sorry. That he was broken now and hoped I could someday forgive him. I didn't finish reading it. I folded the letter slowly, walked outside to my small balcony, and tore it into pieces. The wind carried the scraps away, and with them the last traces of his voice in my life. I didn't need his apology. I didn't want his remorse. What I needed, and had already found, was closure on my own terms. A few months later, I started a support group for military women dealing with betrayal. Emotional, financial, psychological. I shared my story with those who needed to hear that healing was possible, that they weren't alone, and that justice could be served. Helping others became my purpose. Turning my pain into a source of strength for someone else made every dark day worth surviving. Some nights, I still remember the girl who stood in a desert halfway across the world, holding a phone, reading that cold divorce email. The woman who had her bank account emptied, her name dragged through fake documents, her life ripped apart without warning. That version of me didn't know what was coming. But she fought through it. And now, as I sit here, sipping my coffee in the morning light, watching the world go by through my open window, I feel nothing but peace. He deleted me with a click, but I rebuilt myself from nothing. Stronger, wiser, and unbreakable.